Hello, this is Peter Morrissey from the Stockbury Dark. Working closely with my co-host Klaus Almian from Stockholm, Sweden, we plan on bringing you truly dark stories from one side of the world to the other. We have been busy interviewing many of our friends from our world and subculture, stories dealing mainly with the occult, paranormal, and other dark topics. We really hope you enjoy these episodes as much as we do. What started as a spark from the mind of Klaus has now certainly ignited a huge firestorm of stories that will surely keep you up at night. The Stockbury Dark can be found on iTunes podcasts, on our Facebook page, the official Stockbury Dark, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as our website, thestockburydark.com. We can be reached at thestockburydark@gmail.com. Please help us spread the word, and thank you for listening. This episode of the Stockbury Dark is brought to you by the Black Market Kitchen. The Black Market Kitchen is a meal service providing you with delicious, healthy, and clean meals. Do you live a busy life and don't have the time to cook, or do you just prefer the convenience of having your meals prepared? With a range of options to suit many tastes and dietary preferences, Black Market Kitchen caters to a wide variety of folks. Perhaps you want to lose weight, eat less processed and packaged foods, and or just improve your overall health. At Black Market Kitchen, they have developed an understanding of the types of foods athletes and active individuals need to fuel their daily activities. They offer vegetarian, paleo, and ketogenic compliant options in addition to their regular clean meals. The gourmet menu, consisting of perfectly sized portions, is updated weekly, providing customers with something new and delicious each week. It is their mission to make achieving your nutrition goals easier. No matter what your sport or diet, Black Market Kitchen wants to help you become the best version of yourself. Streamline your life and order up your meals. Black Market Kitchen offers statewide door-to-door delivery in Connecticut for a $25 fee. If you're local to the greater Waterbury area, stop in and try a fresh juice, smoothie, protein shake, or bulletproof coffee, and grab a few meals from the cooler. They have tons of healthy snacks to choose from, including their house-made keto bars, as well as raw and vegan options as well. Visit their website at theblackmarketkitchen.com. Sign up for the mailing list and have the weekly menu delivered to your inbox. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram at the Black Market Kitchen. Hello and welcome to the Stockbury Dark. My name is Peter Morrissey.
I'm Klaus, out in Sweden.
And this is our fifth episode. We have a really great guest for you today. We're talking with Rob Lind. Rob Lind from Blood for Blood Flame, Ramallah, Sinners and Saints. Great friend of mine. Very excited to have you here, Rob. Thanks so much for agreeing to talk with us today.
Oh, man, thank you for having me. Like, I know that's the usual standard stock.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm actually looking forward to this.
This is this is the one that we've been looking forward to basically since we started talking about doing this show. Like, we got to get, Peter said right away, if we're doing this, we have to get Rob on. We have to get him on. If not the first episode, then absolutely the first 5. So I'm super happy over here in Sweden to have you on, Rob.
Thank you. Pete had mentioned too before you guys had even begun. He's like, I'm talking about doing this thing, explain the premise, and I think we have been on that topic anyway, or at least related topics, and you guys came pretty far, pretty quick. 5 episodes, you got right on it.
Yeah, it was a few months of like going back and forth and ideas going back and forth with us, and but once we actually finally started the actual recording, mean, it's only been a couple of weeks now.
Yes.
Where we're just like firing ahead and getting. But it was a few months, probably like 5 months of like preparation. With website, artwork, ideas, how we're going to do it, equipment. We're not the most savvy with technology, so
Sure.
it was almost like 3 months of fear of like getting set up. But when we finally did it, I mean, it was super easy, right, Klaus? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just like Peter said, we're not technical people. I'm so far away from a sound engineer as it gets. But I mean, comparing us what we're doing, I mean, we'll try to do this as good as we can, but we will always have the Atlantic Ocean in between us. But this is us honoring great stories and stories that dwell within our circle of friends, our scene, our people. So with that said, I think our listeners are the kind of people that will be more than happy to expect and accept a little bit of noise, because this is about the people telling stories, and the stories in themselves. That's the most important thing.
I can almost guarantee that they'll be merciful in that regard. I just wanted to say one thing, because it leads to the other. I just wanted to say one thing in passing. I was like, I said, you guys had moved so quick, and you were like, no, it actually took quite a while, like 3 to 5 months. And I was like, Jesus, we don't measure time the same way. My when it comes to me, like my impulse to execution is usually about a decade plus 3 years.
Yeah.
But the irony is for all the time that I waste, when I ultimately end up doing something, it's utterly without any preparation whatsoever. Like I do a podcast of my own, and here's where I'll plug it: White Trash Rob's Nodcast. And I should point out for the record that I'm not in Nodcast mode. That's something like I do when I'm in a very, very, very particularly specific mood. But so I don't know if that'll help or hurt, but I planned, to do spoken word forever, and ultimately it just happened. I got shoved on stage after Sinners and Saints acoustic show, and it went really well. So after talking to people for an inordinate, unacceptable amount of time about doing like a podcast or video of some sort, of like, I finally just one day went up in my attic with a Geek Pro camera and turned the fucking thing on. It uses the built-in speaker, which people can't believe. They're like, wait a second, that's the ambient speaker? And I was like, yeah. You've been doing this for like a year and a half? I'm like, yeah. But I will say the sound quality on it is abysmal. This already sounds better. And I can say that when it comes to something genuinely content-oriented, I don't think the type of people that will be attracted to this, serviced by this, and really into this will be too hung up on. They won't be, holding you to like audiophile standards.
No,
and
fuck that. And Rob, I love you for saying that. I mean, when it comes to people like us and our circle of friends, I mean, most of our favorite records took 2 or 3 days to record.
Sure. And sounded horrendous, but ironically, I was talking to somebody about that recently. As bad as the production was back at the beginning of like metal, because the story of modern music production is really the story of bands getting tighter and the engineers being able to capture every twitch on the drums. Like if you go back to like an old Metallica or Slayer album, you can't. The drums are very muted, and not even muted is the right word. Swallowed. They're just swallowed. But the irony is the production has gotten so specific that now every band sounds precisely the same via the production. Whereas back in the day, like a Metallica album sounded different than a Slayer album. The band's suckiness, like the suckiness of the recording quality, almost became a component of the band's sound in hindsight in an interesting way that you don't get anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of flavor missing with modern music and recording.
Precisely. Yes. Yep. Flavor and yeah, absolutely.
I feel a lot like that, and I think a lot about that when it comes to bands doing early 80s hardcore, and like they go for a studio that that targets like alternative music and even hard music, where you should hit up a guy who's used to recording like old R&B or like blues bands, and that's especially if you wanna get that genuine sound that came with hardcore, especially in the US from like 79 till 84, 85. You should go for a studio that's not designed for extreme music whatsoever.
Oh, for sure. It's funny, when Blood for Blood finally got an opportunity to do our first record, we went around to like 100 studios because it was the first time we had a budget. Prior to that, we did our first demo for $40 or $60, 5 songs all in one day, and we didn't even use the whole day. At some studio that closed down like 3 months later. So the first time we had a budget, it was nothing. It was like $1,000.
Yeah.
Which back then was like 2 days rather than 1 day at a real studio. But we went and checked like every studio around town, every one of them. And this was the days of like the sound that was going on at that time was like the helmet sound that really scooped, sucked out. Everything was really sort of sterile. It was the second generation of that Pantera sound that really scooped.
Yeah, it's almost industrial in a way.
Yes, very much so, very much so. Everything's attack, but there's no body. Everything is twitch, but there's no depth.
Yeah, that was like the whole Amphetamine Reptile catalog was pretty close to that.
Yes. Pantera, I'll give them a little bit of credit. They had some body, even though they were using solid state gear, which still blows my mind to this day, amps. But we would go to every studio and they'd show us around, and I didn't care what the fucking place looked like. The other guys would talk and they'd care about, like, I mean, we were fat guys. They'd be like, "Oh, it's got a kitchen." I'd be like, fucking kids. Actually, I shouldn't be a snob. I was like, "Do they got a fridge for beer?" But I remember I'd ask every one of the engineers, like, "Hey, do you know that?" Like, I wouldn't lead them. They'd infer what I was getting at, but I'd say, "Hey, you know that, like, that really like scooped, nothing but high end and low end helmet sound, that really sucked out, jun 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 jun." I'd do that gung 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 gung, and they'd, "Oh yeah, man. Yeah, that's all we do around here, all day in, all day out." I'd immediately come off the list. Like, just right off the list, gone. So we finally got to Jim Siegel at the Outpost down in Stoughton, and he was on thin ice because he was the most expensive out of all of them right off the bat. It turned out the years after I worked with him for years, he became by far the cheapest because he got so much work from the Blood for Blood stuff, people coming in and saying, "I want to sound like that." And I became such good friends with him that dude, like, he basically recorded Sinners and Saints just at cost to pay his electricity. That's all, which is substantial for the Outpost, but it's still nothing. But I went in and we went through the whole routine, and it's a big, beautiful studio. It was actually deliberately designed to be a studio, which is not something you come across these days very often. It was sound engineered and acoustic engineers designed it, and it's a massive studio. It's incredible. But I sprung my trick question on him. I was like, "Hey, you know that?" At the end, I'm like, that Pantera helmet, and before I could even finish, he's like, "Oh, I fucking hate that shit." He's like, "Well, you're not gonna get. Sorry, guys, you're not gonna get that here." And I was like, "What do we get here?" He's like, "I do big '70s analog transistor sounds." And I was like, "We're going here." We got in the car. I was like, "We're fucking going here." And it's kind of expensive, and they don't do that helmet sound. I'm like, "Are you guys daft?" I was tricking him. I hate that. What? But that was what sold me. He's like, you cut me off. He's like, "Oh, I fucking hate that shit." And he's like, "You're not going to get that here." And I was like, I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. I'm like, "Well, what will we get?" He's like, "Big '70s rock." I was like, "We're here. That's it."
Perfect.
But last thing I was going to say about, and then I'll stop randomly proselytizing, is I like the idea that you're having people on from our world, the premise of this thing, but not going after tour stories or anything like that which blow the tits out of me. That's why I don't do them on my own thing. I mean, unless it's pertinent to some larger point.
Right.
I like that you're picking an oblique angle into the minds and experiences via the topic and content on this.
Yeah, that's what we actually, Klaus came to me actually with the idea, almost probably a year ago, and at first I never would even think of doing a podcast or talking about, or I started kind of stay in my own bubble, in my own shell, and then the more we talked about it, it was like, all right, this has to happen. It's something we are really interested in. We've had our own experiences. It was a perfect outlet for us to tell our stories and to hear other stories from people that we've known our whole lives, who maybe never even told anyone else these types of experiences. And I tell you, man, just the feedback from the idea I'm getting back from people we know is incredible. And honestly, no one's heard any of this yet. And I feel once it's released, it's going to unleash a tidal wave throughout our people. I think it's going to we're going to pick up a lot of listeners because it's really cool. It's really interesting, and it's something completely out from left field.
I agree. And an interesting window into if at the beginning, at least, you guys are staying within our social strata of people. I want to hear what they have to say.
Exactly.
But it'll interest anybody because it is through unexplained phenomenon and experiences that we familiarize ourselves with death and the afterlife and try to make sense out of kind of why we're here. It's why everybody is fascinated to some extent or another, unless they are utterly devoid of imagination, in unexplained phenomenon. And that there was just one thing I had to say as a disclaimer. I was always like a complete skeptic, and but I've had a lot of strange experiences, and it was the drummer for Ramallah's mom. I had some strange experiences up there as well. That is like they consider that place active. Something's going on up there. I don't know, but I just wanted to say for the record that any experiences that I do share, I'm just sharing precisely what happened, but I'm not trying to impose any narrative framework on it. I'm not evaluating what happened. You guys can you know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to draw any conclusions. I could just tell you that I've had some strange experiences that are unexplained. I leave it to anybody listening to, draw any conclusions from them, because I still haven't in a lot of the cases.
Yeah, that's I believe that. Same here with everything that I've experienced. It's the same thing. There's no end game to it. It's just.
It's very interesting that you would say that, Rob, because one of the first things that me and Peter talked about in regards to doing this was that we're not seeking any form of answers whatsoever. We're not fucking Ghostbusters. This is not. This has nothing to do with that. This is what you mentioned first. We come from a scene that's very rich of storytelling, but in many cases it ends up being stories that remain within a small circle of friends, like 10-15 people, and we're sure as hell not after people revealing secrets or getting uncomfortable or anything like that. But there's so many of us cool, good, interesting people, and I would also like to add to that skeptics that sit on heavy and fucking fantastic stories that we want to hear for selfish reasons, but that we also know that people that are like us and friends of ours and friends of friends would die to hear, and that's one of the reasons why we're sitting here with Rob Lind tonight.
That very same woman too, because I was going on and on about how I don't believe anything and blah, blah, blah. She's like, well, you've had a lot of strange experiences, and many of them, from my perspective, this is her speaking, indicate that somebody's been watching out for your fucking ass. Maybe you should have an opinion on some of these things because you've collected a lot of personal data. And it's ironic that I'm doing it in the speaking from the place that I am, because I just moved into a new place, and the minute I walked in, I had really weird vibes because it looks precisely like a house I lived in from about age 8 until about age 15 when it was burned to the ground. It was firebombed. I lived in a town called Charlestown, and we suspect that it was torched because my grandmother wouldn't sell. This was a time of gentrification in my hometown where they called them newcomers. We called them yuppies. They were coming in and buying up all the property, and my grandmother owned her, and they particularly liked the brownstones, the ones that looked old and like old Boston. And my grandmother wouldn't sell it, so 3:30 in the morning, somebody threw a Molotov cocktail through the downstairs window, and had I not been awake at 3:30 in the morning on a school night reading William Peter Blatty's Legion, which in its own right is one of the creepiest stories you'll ever read. It's the first book that ever delved seriously and heavily into, in a fictional format, but into the EVP phenomenon. I just happened to be awake. Had I not been, my entire family would be dead. That house burned like a candle. And the irony is the house next door, which was contiguous, connected to my grandmother's house, was burned via Molotov a year to the day before. Both St. Patrick's Day night. Wow. Burned down. And a lot of strange things happened at that house, as I was telling Pete. I was younger. Just strange things. My mother would remember them a lot more clearly, but this new place reminded me of it. It's old, like that place. The place in Charlestown that was burned down was there was a house at that address for 200 years. How much it changed, I don't really know, but this place looked like it. So the minute I walked in, I was like, fuck, this reminds me of Nana's house. So I immediately started putting up smoke detectors. For real, like I did. And the other night, Deirdre was lit and wanted to show me the attic. And it was like 3 a.m. when we walked in, and I was like, let's get the fuck out of here instantly. I just got a bad vibe. I didn't want to be up here. I'm in the attic now. Just one of those vibes. And it's funny because here we've already had a couple of oddball experiences. One night, there's nobody above us. The attic is empty, like I said. That's where I am right now. We're on the second floor. There's people on the first floor. So one night, Deirdre was on the couch. She called me out. She said, "Were you just coming up and down the front stairs?" And I was like, "No, I was out at the kitchen table on the computer." She's like, "Somebody just walked up and down those fucking stairs." Jeez. And I was like, "Well, did you stick your head out?" She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Was there anybody there?" She's like, "No." And I was like, "Then somebody didn't walk up and down those stairs." She's like, "Yes, they did." I filed it in the back of my head. About 4 nights later, she went to work. I'm completely by myself. I heard somebody go up and down the fucking stairs, but this time I waited for the up, not the down. I just heard, it didn't sound like necessarily somebody going exactly up and down stairs. It sounded like somebody banging around right on the other side of the door. And it sounded, it could be anywhere in like a bit between the vicinity of immediately in front of the door and on the stairway, which rises up right from that landing so that they crisscross each other. And I waited like 30 seconds after it went silent and got my balls up and like banged the door up. I was like, "Who's there?" Like a tough guy, but I didn't feel tough. There was nobody there. So I called her up and I was like, "Yeah, well, it happened to me too." She's like, "Oh, cool." So if I run screaming from where I'm at right now, it just means somebody finally went up the stairs and opened the door.
So when you say you had like bad vibes of the place, or at other times during your life, does something usually follow after those types of feelings?
I'm glad you brought that up specifically because it's something that I wanted to frame. I wanted to. It's a distinction I wanted to frame very clearly. I'll give you an example. When I lived up my drummer Bob's house for about a year, and they had a spare room, and I stayed in it, and I had heard nothing but lots of strange stories about that place. That place is possibly even older than my grandmother's. It's been in their family for like 7 or 8 generations. And yeah, they go way back in Newburyport. Like they go back to like almost one of Ann's family members came over on the fucking Mayflower, if I'm not mistaken. And there were a lot, they had claimed they had a lot of strange experiences up there. And I hadn't seen a lot at first. And one day I was cutting through Ann's apartment on my way to the bathroom. Now I'm not going to, I can't give you a layout, but basically it's this, you cut through the entire, it runs from the front door, you go through a living room, you go through a dining room, and you end up in the kitchen, and the bathroom's off to the left of the dining room. So you're cutting through the apartment and taking a sharp left right before the kitchen. And you know when you just glance up and glance down, like you're not paying attention, you just sort of look up and your eyes go wherever they go. I happened to look up into the kitchen doorway, and the silhouette of what I thought was a man, but very clearly like a human being anyway. Shapeless, but like not in some amorphous spectral sort of way. Just like, if like somebody steps into a doorway and there's sunlight behind it, you'll just see really the silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily. Well, this is my point. I saw somebody was standing in that doorway, and as I looked up and looked back down, they stepped back out of the doorway, like somebody got seen and stepped to not be seen. And it took me like 4 seconds to process what I've seen, but I'm remembering this right now, and there's no real interpretation here. It looked like somebody was standing in the doorway and stepped out as I looked up, like when somebody sort of like wants to step out of sight. Even remembering back, that's still the way I interpret it. There's not a lot of it was what it was. In fact, I thought it was Bob trying to be funny. I thought. Well, here's the point. There was no menace. There was no sense of menace that I've had under some other circumstances. In fact, I wasn't even startled. It was just like, I can't explain it. I've gotten senses. Now, this is not a supernatural thing or inherently a supernatural thing or a paranormal thing. I remember one time crossing a bridge real late at night coming back from my job at CVS. It was like 11:30 at night because they kept us really late to do stockroom shit, which legally they weren't supposed to do to school-age kids. But I was crossing the bridge at community college over to the community college train stop, and that is desolate at night. Once they close Bunker Hill Community College, that is nothing but, it looks like one of those areas where Alex and his droogs would beat people up. Like, it's really remote. These huge cement, areas that there's no people. It's all shielded from the street and the sidewalk way below. It would be a good place to jump somebody. And I got over there's like an overpass that goes over a highway, and then you're in this dark campus of Bunker Hill Community College, which, as I said, is just like this big industrial looking thing. And there were two guys waiting on the other side of the bridge. One was a homeless guy, and one was this little Latino guy in like a members only jacket, which is a consistent theme in my life. All drug dealers and bad dudes in my life seem to wear members only jackets. But the homeless guy walked away going, nah, right as I got over the overpass. And the little Latino dude starts walking towards me saying, "Hey, what's up?" But I read menace off this. I knew this guy was about to do something. I could tell by his fucking body language. Nothing overt, nothing. But I immediately, my guard went way up, and he kept saying, "What's up?" And I was like, "Nothing." And he's looking. Then he starts looking around. Now, that's a very obvious sign. That's much more clear, but I knew right away. So after he started looking around and said, "What's up?" a third time, I yanked a can of mace out of my bag and stepped back. He thought it was a knife. I was like, "Oh, fucking just ask what's up." He's going to pull a knife. And I just waited until he left. But that's what I'm saying. It's not necessarily, it's a human interpretive things. Certain things, you read minutia and it triggers warnings and stuff like that. I got none of that from this experience when I saw this shape. So about an hour later, Bob came home for lunch, and I told him about it, the shape in the kitchen. And he was like, oh, was there anything weird about the guy? And I was like, weird how? He's like, just maybe appearance or something? I was like, oh, wait, all right. I was like, yeah, there was. But it was hard to tell. It was, I was like, write down what you're going to tell me. And he wrote it down. And I said, the guy's head was real big, like too big. And Bob showed me his fucking piece of paper and it said, was he wearing a hat? Like a brim hat, you know what I'm saying? That was, I was like, whoa, that's fucking creepy. And then the next thing was, we better go downstairs and tell my mother you saw that. And I said, why? He said, whenever we see that shape in the kitchen, it means something bad's going to happen around the house. Wow. I'm not fucking around. 4 hours later, a pipe let loose in the kitchen above and poured about 2,000 gallons of water through their light fixture. I fucking shit you not. You can draw whatever conclusions you want from this, but I witnessed these as events, no question. I mean, that's just the sequence of events as they happen. Whether it's coincidence, yeah, possibly. I've seen stranger coincidence, but that's precisely the way it went down.
Wow. So that presence was like an omen to their family, obviously.
They consider it a very good one in the sense that they think it's their one of the grandfathers or great-grandfathers. I can't remember. You'd have to ask Bob. He's got a million of these stories from that place. But they always they consider it a good omen, but a warning one that something's going to happen. They saw him another time, and something burned in the backyard and almost caught the house. There was like a couple of things with that one, the kitchen shape. But that's just precisely what happened. What it was, I don't know.
Wow. That's a cool little story, definitely.
There was no sense of menace from that. There have been other experiences I've had where, there's, that sense of unease, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And this attic gave me it the other night instantly when we walked in. I was like, baby, let's get the fuck out of here. Nothing, that I could lay a finger on. Just one of those feelings. The human element.
It's very amazing how those types of things that can trigger something, just walking into a place or, being present and getting those like, what is the word I'm looking for? Just like a primal feeling that you can't explain. You just know there's like a fight or flight kind of reaction towards it all, where you can just sense the heaviness. And I felt that so many times in my life. Not saying that every time I felt that something happened, but
what's interesting and something that we brought up in one of the first episodes is that that feeling when you're in a business meeting or any kind of meeting or at a show or wherever where there's a lot of people and you get that really strong feeling that someone's looking at you. And you start to turn around, and like the person might even be behind you, but you look around and then you see the person. It's like, oh, it's he or she, or it might be even someone you don't know, but the person is actually looking at you. That's a fucking strong feeling. That feeling is it's just as strong as hunger, and it's weird when you get that exact feeling in a context where there isn't a person or a living being around, but the feeling is still there.
Yeah, it's funny too because it's a very difficult feeling to describe, but it's like I am more likely to catch it, not as maybe somebody looking at me, but I'm so hyper vigilant in public that I'd already have scanned their quadrant to see if anybody's looking at me, but. Just that feeling in a crowded club or a bar or something like that, when something's going to jump off, when it's reading tensions, it's reading minutia, and it's really like a spectrum. If you're reading, if you're hypersensitive to it, you might read it, like you said, Pete, something doesn't always happen. I'm so guarded that I'm always looking for stuff like that. And so I often will get the signal and nothing does happen. But then you can go the other way and just completely ignore it. Like if I had la-di-da'd up to that dude that was cutting across community college to come do whatever he intended to do, probably just jump me. But if I had not read that, I don't know what would have happened. But he definitely had some intent. That's just a very specific example, but and yet, like you said, a primal thing. I wonder how much of I don't know. I'm not as sharp as I often am. I'm not at my best right now as far as descriptive, like being able to articulate myself because I was sick earlier this morning, like I told Pete. But
I think you're describing it really well.
What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, I said I think you're describing it really, really well.
Well, I think it is rooted in your reptilian portion of your brain, reading those things that can't be easily described. Because if they're easily described, then something can't be unusual. If I'm losing an axiom right here or an aphorism. If it was really easy to describe, it wouldn't be like a gut intangible feeling, would it? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I believe that. Excuse me.
I think in a lot of ways we're probably designed to not get caught by surprise, and that goes back probably 100,000 years.
Yeah, that goes. I think that's like wired into anything with DNA going back as far as that may go. I think that's hardwired in. As soon as nervous systems develop to the point that they could read beyond, like a planaria or a flatworm or something like that. As soon as we got beyond simple celled, but you wonder how much of it's still there. You know what I mean? Like scent. You ever smell something and it just takes you back, total recall to a memory that you didn't even know it was there, but it's suddenly there in its entirety? Mm-hmm. Like you'll smell something vague and all of a sudden you'll get total recall of some event that was utterly buried, but you'll get it back in total clarity. There's a good physiological reason for that. Scent is an older. A lot of our senses are run because we are self-aware, intelligent beings that have come to dominate the earth via our intelligence and not our strength. Rocky of tooth and claw. Like we're water balloons compared to most of the other animals on earth. We're just blood balloons. It's our intelligence that allowed us to come to this apex, predator position. And most of our senses are run through our frontal lobe, our neocortex, to be interpreted by the most recent portion of our brain to develop. Scent isn't. Scent runs right to the reptilian portion of your brain, a much older part of your brain. That's why scent, you don't have a choice. When you get a certain scent, smells, they prick that memory whether you want it or not. And they prick it in its entirety. That's why it can bring back an incredibly horrible memory. Like if, the smell of a fire. The other night I was walking up the street and I got that. Somewhere, a house must have burned somewhere within a mile or so. I got that smell. And it just took me back to both of those experiences of having the house burned down with utter clarity, total fucking recall. No choice. I didn't particularly want to take this stroll down memory lane. You don't really have a choice when it comes to scent, because it's an older sense, and it's wired to an older portion of our brain. It's just music. This is a total tangent, and it's probably a useless one. But music works on both levels. Music fires through your neocortex, your new brain, your thinking brain, your weighing, rationalizing brain. But at the same time, it engages areas of your brain that are much older. That's why music has such a potent impact on people, because it's actually a double-pronged attack. Certain beats and stuff mimic. I've talked about this at great length on my podcast because it's something that greatly interests me. Certain beats and stuff mimic very specific physiological states, like the hardcore beat. What is that? High heart rate, panic, tension, stress. The big bust. What's that? Release, rage, catharsis, fucking, literally. You fuck to that fucking beat. There's a reason these beats have such a potent impact on us. That's why a lot of the black metal shit does nothing for me, because it doesn't mimic a physiological state. What's a blast beat? Maybe but a seizure. At the same time, though, this stuff is all wild together. It's pricking memories and physiological states, but it's also wired through your neocortex. You get this big ball of memories and sensory. Like, you hear a song from when you were a kid, it'll bring you right back, possibly to the first time you heard it. These are things outside of our control, but it's also, and this is, I'm wrecking this show. This is so off topic, but
no. It's all connected, and I think it's also why, like, a person who's not even from the UK or the islands, or a person who's not of Irish or British heritage in the US, like, you could take a person in, a man from Asia or Africa or South America, and he will hear battle drums and bagpipes, and he, all of a sudden, his eyes will get wet, and he will feel something.
Oh, you're talking about the universal language of music.
Not necessarily, but I for one believe that war is in our DNA too.
Oh, for sure. Oh, absolutely. Drums were the original.
Yeah, war drums.
Yeah, they were the original music, and they were the original form of communication over distance. But what I was getting at was just that because music engages you on so many different levels, it's why it's of such. It's like one of the last religions to people that can have an almost paranormal effect on people. Total recall of memories they don't want, sometimes do want. An effect on your physiological being. You're getting into things like self-hypnosis, and I can change my mood via song selection. I'm bipolar. I haven't historically had a lot of control over my fucking moods, but there are certain songs I can choose that will reliably give me a desired mood change. And I guess if I'm bringing this up in the context of the show, it's because these older senses and stuff like that, I sometimes wonder if they're at the core of perception and why some people see things sometimes that are unexplained, some people don't. Why some people are sensitive to certain areas, some people aren't. Is it there for everybody? Is it, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what I'm getting at. I'm doing exactly what I said I wouldn't, which is getting into interpretive interpretation of strange events and getting into like existing frameworks and stuff like that. I didn't want to do that, but
I got something really interesting that I would like to get into. Unfortunately, we didn't meet that time, but in April of 2017, I was in the neighborhood with a mutual and very good friend of ours, Jimmy, also known as Jimmy Knuckles.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. We were up in Salem,
brother.
And me and Peter, we have talked about this on the episode too, and the place where I grew up has a very, very, very heavy feel to it. It's hard to explain, but it's old, and you can sense that there are things basically in the surroundings that just like affect everything. And I felt the same thing in Salem, not because of the fucking witch trials, but just like something really old lays there, and something very old is buried there. And I would just like to get into fucking Salem if you have stories from Salem, because it's one of the first colonies, right?
Certainly one of the first major epicenters
Yeah.
of like commerce. It was I believe until it was usurped by a couple of other better ports. It was the port on the East Coast for like 100 years. Yeah, it's interesting that feeling because, like I said, it could. The ostensible reason is it reminded me. I got it the other night. Not even the other night. The first day I walked into this new place, I got bombarded by a wash of heavy heavy feelings. I was actually depressed for a couple of days. Couldn't put my finger on why. But it was strong. And it again, you're getting into like this nebulous area. It can be hard to break down to language. And speaking, like you said, about the area you're from, this is William S. Burroughs used to say that he thought America, the entire fucking country, was haunted ground, unhallowed ground. He thought America was just haunted. And he just thought that's why it was a beautiful place. America's got some of those beautiful vistas, scenery, but he thought that's why it was such a contentious, needlessly violent place. He just thought the land was somehow cursed. I just thought it was a really interesting conceit. There's no way to ever prove something like that. It was just, I remember reading that and being struck by that, because you can always think of a place you've been where you get bad vibes or strange vibes or deja vu or something like that. And, there's often no explaining it. Or maybe there is. Maybe we just haven't, reached a point where we can.
So Rob, we months ago, I think we were on a phone call together. I was driving to New York. We probably spoke for like 90 minutes, and there was another story that you were telling me, which on the way down as I was driving, I just had goosebumps in my car, for about 30 minutes straight after listening to speak about this. So I was wondering if maybe we can get into a little bit of that story as well, because
rein me in here, guys. Get the electric cattle prods out. Fucking keep me within a confined area. Otherwise, I will run amok in your apartment, knocking over stuff. And what's this book? Hey, is this game any good? What's this movie about? Like they don't call it manic depression for nothing. Which one were you talking about?
It was I think. Was it a house that you might have grown up in, or a family member, and there was a story about a child that passed away?
Oh shit! Yeah, that was the place that burned down.
Yeah.
That third floor apartment stayed in our family with a couple of different. My grandmother owned the place,
mm-hmm.
And that stayed in. She would rent it to members of the family that were having problems, low rent.
Mm-hmm.
Give people a place to stay, like periods of transition. Somebody's out of work, they could stay there. So basically, my brood was there for like 9 years. The only reason why we got out of there is because someone decided to burn us out. But there were a series of strange events there. First and foremost, she kept a room at the end that would have just been a bedroom at the end of the apartment. She put a door in from the hallway, And the door that was originally the way into the room from the inside of the apartment, she had boarded up, and she kept the room, the door that she had put in to allow access from outside of the apartment. She kept that fucking thing locked up. And when I say locked up, like a lot of locks, the reason for this, and this doesn't actually in any way have anything to do with the overall story. It just maybe adds to the maybe some of the background pollution of this particular apartment. I got one of her tenants hung himself in there, and she didn't find him for quite a while, and I guess it was kind of gross when she found him. But she never got over it because she evicted him, and he did it a couple of days later. So she carried a great deal of guilt over the situation, and whatever she saw in there when she found the body, which if it was a couple of weeks would have probably been pretty visceral. She didn't want anybody else, the kids running around in there or anybody sleeping in there or whatever. In her case, it was nothing to do with weirdness. It was just whatever. She just didn't want anybody in there.
Yeah, and also if it's a matter of a couple of weeks, it actually takes a couple of days or at least a week to air the place out and actually clean up, because it gets messy pretty quick.
Oh yeah. Bodies dissolve pretty quickly at room temperature. So that was always locked up, and they would never tell us why. Years later, they and I think I might have wheedled it out of an aunt or an uncle while I was still living there, but it never really bothered me. I mean, the room had nothing to do with us. I thought of it just as like another part of the house at that point, nothing really to do with us. But there were a lot of strange events in that apartment, and like I said, I'm not at my best right now, so I don't know if I'll describe this as well as I could if I was like, sharp. But it was always involved. It was always stuff going back. We had aunts and uncles that lived there before us. They had strange experiences of the exact same nature. It always involved a child. And what I mean by that is, like, I remember we had a little brother, Patrick, who was born in that house, and his toys would go missing and they'd be moved around and stuff like that. Now, that's just kids. Stuff like that happens. But when they never show up, one Christmas, a bunch of little, like, baby toys that were wrapped just disappeared from under the tree. And they were never accounted for, ever. Now we're getting it, like, we never found them. Not when we, ever. Like, they never showed up. It's not like they just turned up. Me and my brother Mark didn't steal them. We were like in 12, 13 at this point. But, if they really were missing, what did they go into the void? So that's not possible. But the way it all started to come together, some of these strange experiences for my family, and it was the same for the previous family, which is my aunt and uncle, was a baby crying at night. And it started to happen. And we, and it started when Patrick was born and brought into the house. We'd hear, in the night, baby crying, and then we'd talk about it the next day, and my mother would be like, no, Patrick didn't wake up last night. We'd be like, he damn well did. He fucking woke me and Mark up. You know what I mean? Like, arguments like that. Most of the time, just, what's the word? Subjective. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Maybe my mother slept through it. Maybe she didn't hear him. You know what I mean? Like, hard to really prove after the fact. But there were a couple of times when it was, like, indisputable. Like, heard somebody crying, all came out. Patty's asleep. We're looking at each other, like, stuff like that. And I remember one particular time, I don't remember the details. This is what gets hard with the passing of time, but it sounded like the baby crying through the house, like from one end to the other. And I forget the details, but this one was one. My mother confirmed this one too, but it wasn't Patrick. I mean, that's it.
What's also what's scary about that is that if you're a parent, and I mean we're used to listen to our kids crying and laughing and doing a bunch of stuff. That's not what a baby crying sounds like. Like you can locate it to a certain room.
Yeah. Especially when you're talking an infant's not moving around on its own volition, is it?
No.
Well, this comes to bear because my aunt and uncle who lived there previously had very similar experiences. And my aunt has very strong beliefs. She believes in the afterlife. She believes in... Phone just going on. Guys, give me 1 second. Sorry,
no worries.
Sorry,
No problem.
sorry, guys.
We'll just cut all this area out. Let me no problem.
Yep.
I foolishly brought the cordless up with me, and then I left it out of arm's length. So,
Yeah, no worries at all.
well, my aunt and uncle had similar stuff, and like I said, my aunt, we used to consider her daffy. She believes in like fairies and sprites and stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying that fairies and sprites don't exist. I just don't have any conclusive evidence they do. But she thought they were in the house, like making her bread and stuff like that. She's kind of crazy, but she would tell us a lot of stories. The whole point of this is years later, my grandmother she would always get worked up when we tell her anything that had to do with, anything to do with the mystery child. She didn't like to talk about it. The whole crux, the punchline of this is that a child had died in the upstairs during it may have been like a stillborn, but the birth took place in the parlor, and the child was baptized in the sink, the other end of the house. Mm-hmm. And that sink was the same sink. It was like 70, 80, 90, the sink was ancient. And my grandmother disclosed all that stuff later. And my aunt had, I wish I had prepped for this. My aunt had some other details that I wasn't especially pleased to hear. But it's just funny because this was an ongoing thing. Like, my aunt Alice had lived here before. The aunt and uncle, she had some strange experiences too. She was a little more flat earther, so she didn't put too much into them. But that was.
So was it mostly like the experiences they had to your grandmother? Was it also hearing like this baby's crying through the night?
The crying was the big one. That was the one.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to be just terrifying, being in a house and hearing like a child wailing in the background. And as a parent, even if there was another child in the house, you know your kid's noises. I can pick up my daughter at her school in a playground of 100 kids. I could pick out her voice out of all those children. I could hear her. I could hear her laughing, or if she was screaming, or if she was talking. I can hone in on that. So I can imagine what it was like to be in a home and maybe with another baby that was in there as well, and hearing this crying and this wailing going through the night, and knowing full well that's not my child. That right there would like I don't know what kind of feeling I would get out of that, but that's something really, really terrifying to me.
Yeah, that's really ominous. The other thing too is like I think we all can agree on this. Like we are wired to not be comfortable while there is a baby crying.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like that is like fucking hardwired.
I mean, there's something about you that needs to take care of that.
Yes,
that's why they cry. You know, you have to
absolutely.
attend to that immediately. Imagine just hearing that and not being able to do anything about it. How long would that last for? When you were hearing
Episodes, it seemed like it would always be done by the time we were coming together over it. Like, what is that? Boom, like over.
And it would just fade right out.
Yeah, or even like right before, like, you know, we step out. Did you fucking hear that? Yeah. Where was that? It sounded like it was Patty's room. My mother would be standing in the doorway. It's not Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
That was.
Did it seem like it was coming from the same area all the time, or would it switch?
Not necessarily. Like I said, sometimes it moved. Like that one, I don't remember the details. I could check with my mother real easy, where it seemed like it moved. And I was like, I remember thinking, like, is my mother walking Patrick up and down the house? Like, you know, trying to, you know how you walk a baby at night, like if they're crying. And that one was a conclusive no. Like it came out and she wasn't there. Went in like asleep.
And like going back in time, that was a pretty normal procedure. If a person, an adult or a child or a baby passed away in that house, they were usually prepped in that house as well, and they would do viewings in the house of, you know, there were no actual, a lot of times not actual funeral homes where you would carry on these services. So I'm wondering if, you know, a child passed in that manner there, and a viewing was held there, and
oh, sure, that's where we get the term living room,
right?
Because with the advent of more funeral homes being available for everybody, they didn't want to call it the showing room anymore, or the death room.
Right.
They wanted to recast the front room of the house in a different role, so they started calling it the living room. Let's all hang out there because up until relatively recently, unless you were, and even then, sometimes, you know, unless you were wealthy or really, like if you were in a remote area, like a farmhouse or something like that, you waked your dead in the front room. You took care of them yourself. You laid them on a door as a cooling board, and all of this stuff. You know, the way we've managed in this society make death very, very, very remote is a new development.
Yes.
That's something we've done recently. I don't think it's necessarily a healthy thing, at least not entirely. For this reason, I'll tell you why. It took a lot of experience with death, people dying around me, for a variety of different reasons. Mostly suicide and drugs in my case, but you know, how am I going to frame this? Show me a 40-year-old guy in a leather jacket singing about babies dying and war and a bunch of other stuff he doesn't know anything about, and I'll show you a fucking child. I don't write songs glorifying death or mutilation and suffocation and all this other crap. You know why? Because I've seen people mutilated. You know why? Because I've seen people suffocated. You know, and yeah, I haven't experienced war, but I've seen enough death to be able to project and say, I really don't want war. I see these grown men in armor with spikes and stuff like that who couldn't get their dick sucked in a whorehouse with $100 bill sticking out of their fucking fly. War, death, you're a nerd. If you had experienced any death, you wouldn't be into that shit. Death is nothing to sneeze at or laugh at. It sucks. Robs you of people forever, and you're never going to get closure on it in this lifetime. You're never going to know if you're going to see him again. I'm not wild about death because it's become familiar to me. Well, I wonder why there's no like Middle African death metal bands. I don't think there's any, because if you're surrounded by death and decaying flesh and all that crap on a regular basis, I doubt you want to relax with a nice 6-pack and an album about rotting corpses. You know what I'm saying?
You're so right about that.
Whenever you stumble across, especially from a subcultural point of view, you stumble across a certain type of people that will glamorize death, and I would say especially suicide, very soon you realize that these are people that have had it pretty fucking good in their lives, and they haven't seen any of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree with that. I really do.
Yeah, I touched on this with Peter, but with not necessarily just Ramallah, but also Blood for Blood. Did you ever touch on any of these subjects when writing lyrics, like these weird experiences that you've had?
No, I never did. It's funny too. Anything that I wrote about for lyrics, even to this day, it can't be ephemera to me. It has to be like ground zero for like like my existential crisis or existential matters. They have to be like core to like anything less than like what's killing me, could kill me, has killed people around me. I got to kind of stay with that stuff. That's where I keep my focus. Like I'll give you an example. Like my mother one time was like, "You should write a song about the fire," and I was like, "Why? It happened." She's like, "Yeah, but you could blah blah blah," and I was like, "I don't know. It's not universal." I was like, that's not the core of it." I was like, "That was just a detail, one of the many sucky details." I was like, "But that's not like that's not." It's not the core of my experience. That was just one bad thing that happened. Like, how to explain? But no, I never did. I never did. If I had maybe gone into a different style, but that's impossible. You're trying to like separate the onion at that point. I got into what I did because I did. But if I was younger and started music like maybe when I was like 14 or 15, I might have been more fixated on that sort of thing, and felt free enough to maybe go off topic from time to time. But,
Fuck
yeah.
For me though, like the very idea of Rob writing a song about the fire, that sounds pretty fucking amazing. I must say.
Yeah, she was like she kept bringing it back up to us. Like, yeah, but I don't have any unresolved feelings about that, except if I found the guy who did it, I'd murder him.
I understand that.
I've always heard you like probably reference that fire like 3, 4, 5 times over the years, but I never really knew the reason behind it. And even just hearing it today, it's pretty crazy to me. Where you think it could have, could have been an intent. Like obviously it was intentional, but a way to get people out of that home because they want to build up the neighborhood. I never knew the reasoning behind it, which is pretty fucking serious and pretty crazy.
Life is fragile.
My uncle one night started. He had never gotten over it. My grandmother's son, and
sorry to cut you off. Did that fire like decimate the house or?
Oh yeah. You could see through the walls to the outside by the time it was done.
Yeah, wow.
It had eaten through like it was a shell.
Mm-hmm.
The third floor had some salvageable stuff, except that the one thing people don't think about is everything gets covered in 3 inches of like soot.
Right.
And even if you get the soot off, you never get that smell out. Like it is like part of your life. But yeah, the downstairs was literally eaten through to the scaffolding. Like, but my uncle had put together this case over the years, largely coincidental, but against this real estate magnate that he was pretty sure was the guy behind it. He started showing it to me one night. He was getting lit and telling me, and I was like, "You're gonna have to either stop telling me about this, or we are gonna make plans tonight to do something about it. It's one of the." And he was like, "I still don't feel strong enough to go." And I was like, "Okay, because when you do, I'm not lighting just one side of his house. I'm lighting both sides so he don't get out." It was something I had to drop because I hadn't thought about it in like 5-10 years at that point. He was drawing me back into that.
Yeah.
Nothing will make you feel vulnerable and emasculated like having your house burned down.
Oh,
You defense.
I couldn't imagine,
Yeah, like it's like the one thing you can't do anything about, and it's the ultimate cowardly act. Like it's like raping, like drugging somebody and raping them. Like it is like everybody's vulnerable to it. But the problem is, it's the easiest thing in the world to get away with. And I'll tell you something else, too, that bugged me forever. I was the only person up. I knew the exact time, and I had details like screech of tires at the top of my street, noise of an engine tearing down our street, smash of the glass, the whoosh of the gas catching with blue papers around 3 floors up through 4 doors. The arson squad never spoke to me, and you know what they said? They said somebody poured gas through the mailbox. Check this out. First of all, because it was one of those big old New England brownstones which had like the double doors, and there was a big mailbox, but there's a problem with this. The epicenter of the fire was 5 feet away in the direction the car was traveling, which would make sense. It went through the top window above. And it would have carried about 7-8 feet until it hit the right-hand wall. That's where the hottest point of the fire was. I had firefighters verify that for me, guys that were there. They're like, no, that's the center. Second thing was there was 4 inches of clearance under the door that they supposedly poured the gas into the mailbox slot. So if they lit that up, they would have lit themselves on fire. So the question becomes, what was their incentive to lie?
Yeah, very strange.
If they're the arson squad, there can only be one thing. They were bought. And if that, there's a word I'm looking for here. This was an onion I was unwilling to peel because I would have it in me to murder those involved, or at least burn them. Light their houses on fire years later. And to be honest, I don't really want that on my karma if I can help it. So it was like when my uncle started giving me all these details, I was like, you know what? If we're not going to take a drive tonight, I don't really need to hear this right now.
I wonder if there were any other similar arsons in that manner around that same time. If other people were holding out and
torched the exact same way 1 year to the day beforehand.
On St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry about that. So it was the same exact style, same MO to the crime.
That one, I don't remember exactly what the ignition was for that. I don't know if it was a Molotov, but it's so weird for it to be to the day. You know what I'm saying? Like, firefighters that came to show up were like, "Oh, this is deja vu." Wow. They certainly noted it, but that if it was indeed what's the word I'm looking for, a real estate thing at the top level, you're talking about somebody that would have the money to buy perhaps off the investigators.
Right.
I don't even like thinking about that. Because they'd be even worse than the guy that did it. Or the guy that profited directly from it.
Yeah.
Because those are the people that you trust in to be a shield against that shit.
You're right.
Sorry, this is off topic, but it's certainly dark enough.
Yeah, no. I was thinking the same thing. It fits right into everything that we're doing.
Yeah, this is not off topic at all.
That house that burned, it haunted my dreams. For years later, I would always be in that fucking house, and I would wake up in the house. I was always glad to be back there because that was like the last time we had a semblance of happiness in our family, just for a variety of reasons, not because the place was inherently like a good place. Like I said, there was a lot of weird shit that went on there, but I would have dreams about it, and I'd always be in the dream. I'd be walking around, remember things with a clarity that I didn't even think I could rival in like a waking state. And I'd always suddenly at some point become aware that it had to be a dream because I knew this place burned. And then I'd suddenly have this feeling like I was embalmed in some kind of black magic. Like This place doesn't exist anymore. I can't be here. I have to get the fuck out of here. This is some kind of dark voodoo. I should not be in this place. It doesn't exist in the real world anymore. This would be in the dream. And I would like try to, and then all of a sudden become aware that something was hunting me in the house. And I'm sure that's just like a metaphor for the fire, but well, it's actually Baby Ellen calling me. He hasn't called me in a couple of days. I'm sorry about that. I had the phone in my pocket. I'll call him back later. But I'd always have this feeling that something was hunting me, and in the dream, I'd be lucky if I got out of the house, and then I'd look back into one of the windows, and it would be me looking at me. I'd see me from the window looking at me. And some other times I didn't get out. I would wake up like right as something caught up with me, and I don't know what that was. Mm-hmm. Sure, it was, like I said, some Jungian, Freudian shit for the fire, but
it's a life
happy memories
affecting and changing scenario, and that's a big. I don't know. I feel like that's a big part of your. I don't know what words I'm exactly looking for, but life-altering experience for you. You know, like I feel like you might think about it as your life before the fire and after the fire. I don't know if you think.
It's funny in hindsight. I do. It's funny, and I didn't realize how maybe formative it was. I learned a level of distrust in the wake of that fire. Like I already distrusted people. Those who were supposed to protect and care for me were asleep at the switch. But that really showed me something. I can't put my finger on it. You can't lay your head down to sleep. Like somebody might come into your life and fucking wish you murder. You know what I mean? Like, had I not been awake, like my whole family would be fucking dead. The firefighters were very clear about that. Yeah. That place was a Roman candle within about 10 minutes from the crash until and I just had a lot of hate for whoever did it because it was so cowardly.
With fucking children in the house, you know, it's
an infant. So whoever they were, and the one of the firefighters thought, well, if it was insurance, like gentrification, they're doing it because it was two houses separate from the rest of the block. It would contain the fire. I was like, yeah, real noble. There were infants in the house. What a fucking, let me throw the guy a parade.
It's fucking sick over money, ultimately.
Over money.
You know?
That's disgusting.
Money. It's your fucking soul. I always thought about that. Like, people are always fascinated by mobsters. Like those old 70s gangster movies. And not 70s, just set in the 70s. And people worship that Donnie Brasco shit and fucking... I often watch it, and I realized it's a fantasy. What it really comes down to, first for the real guys that are involved, trading your soul for money, so you can have the best 8-track player on your block. 10 years later, you don't even want an 8-track player. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's your soul. Like, I don't even believe in it. Like, I don't even have a theological framework. There's just some things that you got to live with. Like, murder, corrupt for money. Because what's that translate to? I guess power in some cases. Maybe if you came from, I don't know. I came from about as poor as you can come from in America anyway. I mean, I know it doesn't compare with 1830s London, but I understand that feeling of powerlessness. But at what cost do you want to feel? I don't know. That's a topic for a different day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like we hit on a lot today, Rob, and we'll probably wind down right now. We've been speaking probably for like 90 minutes or so, and
for sure. If this isn't,
hold on. This is absolutely perfect. I want to ask you: would you be down for an episode 2 in the future, part 2?
Anytime, because I feel like I could be a little bit more focused on the structure of the show itself.
Yeah, that's fine, Rob. Because I mean, you honestly. You're great. Like I said to you yesterday, anything you have to say, no matter what topic, you're a captivating speaker. People want to hear you talk. You got a certain way of saying things, and I was like honored. Even as a good friend, I'm honored that you're here doing this with us because it's super easy to listen to you. It's super easy to talk to you, and I feel people are going to hear Rob Lind on our show, and they're not even going to want to listen to us. You know what I mean?
But for the same reasons,
that's true.
Like, when you told me about this, the fact that you followed through, like I'm really honored by that. Like that makes me feel good. But like I said, I would absolutely do a number 2 because I think what you guys are trying to do deserves if I feel like it deserves me applying myself to a little bit more to the topic matter at hand. And like I can always babble on any random topic, but I think that I feel like I wasn't quite prepared. And like I said, I was up sick with that acid reflux shit until like 8 a.m. So if you guys do decide you want to do another one, anytime, guys.
Yeah, I know we'll definitely have you back because it's something that I know you're going to be almost a constant here for us. We'll probably have you on a few times, as we move along. We got some good plans, and you're definitely a person that we'd like to speak with again, basically. So,
Rob,
thank you so much.
This was everything I wanted it to be, 200%.
I'm glad. And anytime, guys, for real. Like I love doing this kind of thing. Just throwing around ideas. Like I think that's like the core of what the human experience should be about it at its best. The exchange of ideas.
So yeah, thanks so much, Rob. I'll be in touch with you probably by tonight, and we'll get this edited and sent over to you to get a listen to it, and we'll just go.
I'm dying to hear the other ones too.
Yeah, we'll hopefully have them all out within the next couple weeks. This will be our 5th one completed. We got a couple more this week that we're getting out. By next week, the first block should be done, and then we'll have them out there for everyone to listen to and enjoy. So, Klaas, anything else to say?
No, just again, it was an honor to have you on. I don't think of this as a one-time thing. I want to do this with you again, and this was everything I wanted it to be. And you paint beautiful. I mean, beautiful. I'm gonna say that you paint beautiful pictures with your music, but you paint beautiful pictures in a conversation too, Rob.
Guys, thank you. The honor's mine. But anytime, for real. I love what you guys are doing, and I'd love to do it again.
You got it. All right. Thank you very much, Rob. This is Stockbury Dark signing off. We'll see you guys soon.
Good night.
Good night, guys.
Good night.